again, Kyle, I really appreciate you coming on. So it says we're live now, so that's great. I wanted to
Perfect.
jump in and get right to something very important. Not a single entrepreneur I've ever met, or historically speaking, ever made a big move from inside of a comfort zone. I never heard the origin story that sounded something like, well, we were on the yacht, we were drinking Cristal, and we decided to call it Instagram. And as a matter of fact, the Instagram story is pretty funny. Those guys had a failed app, and they weren't homeless, but
Yeah.
they weren't living La Vida Loca. They were coming out of a bad circumstance, kind of a failed app. They were going up against something that was similar to Foursquare. It didn't work out. They were trying to figure out what to do, and Instagram came out of that. And I wanted to ask you, what was the? It's really a two-part question, Kyle. One, what made you come up with the idea for this product? Number one, but number two, and more importantly, what was the circumstance in your life that motivated you to push you to create this?
Yeah. So honestly, what motivated is I've been through a lot of different situations. And I guess my most recent one was working at a personal injury law firm in Texas. And I just watched how much, how much data they dealt with and how hard it was for them to even get their hands on some of their own case files once it was uploaded and they needed different things and they had to make requests for essentially their documents. Um, and then also my children. I have a 2 year old, a 5 year old, and my oldest is now 24, and he has a 1 year old. So I'm a grandpa, and yes. So you know, just watching my kids nowadays play with and essentially any toy now, and if they have an iPad or something like that, kids are now trading their biometrics just to play a game. And I guess just seeing it all and kind of putting it together, and then on top of all the, I'm seeing, in Texas, they're building data centers left and right. I mean, multiple multi-billion-dollar data centers. So if that's not a clear, eye opener of like how much data is worth nowadays, it just really got me thinking. Like, I don't know, I'm old school, man. So I was like, why can't we, especially 2025, kind of it changed things in terms of the hardware that we have available to us, as an individual user. And it just got me thinking, like, why can't we own our own?
Sure. And I've heard that if the app is free, if the game is free, then you're the product being sold. It's your data that's being traded. So
Yep.
let's start with because that's great. My next question, you predicted it perfectly because I wanted to address the threat to the children because that's something that even the non-tech savvy people watching this can understand that. So as a parent, put it into perspective of what the threat is, Kyle. And number two, how does your product solve that problem?
So first, I mean, again, if you see any of the, I try not to watch news because it's just so negative nowadays. But if you see any of the, I mean, you can't miss it nowadays. There's I just seen something this morning about you have to watch out with their saying don't buy AI toys for your kids because they're sexually explicit and you never know what they're telling your children. On top of that, that device is also collecting face biometrics, all their emotions of how they react. Like all that is worth money nowadays. That's the new oil of the 21st century.
I saw the way you
And
wrote that on your LinkedIn post. That was a great way to, when you said that, you said it's like oil, and I thought that is a brilliant comparison. That really puts it into perspective about how value they're mining our um I guess our individual and look, I understand
our
at the end of the
cognitive
day
sovereignty, really.
that oh that's yeah, that's even better. Yeah, because you're different than I am. I have certain foods and predilections and things that I like, and if enough data is gathered I could walk through my day having to contend with a stream of irresistible offers. and meanwhile I have bills to pay. I can't, so, it's just like the grocery store. You go to the checkout and now as a dad, you understand this. All that stuff at the end cap right before you go to the cash register is designed for your little girl or your little boy to grab that candy bar. So we get put in this
Yes,
situation. So imagine this happening digitally, but at 100 times more powerful. I think we're probably
man.
dealing with that kind of strength. So for people that don't understand about, which I didn't when we first met, about air gapped AI, and I had to do some research for this episode so I would know a little bit and be able to ask intelligent questions. But for people that don't know, explain exactly what your device does and how companies and individuals can use these.
So, again, as my profile says, brother, I'm not a tech guy. I don't have a tech background. I don't come from AI, or any of that. I'm just a dad who sat at home and like they gave us the tools. So I'm like, let's use the tools. And I just sat there and spent, I mean, over 4,000 hours of breaking things and trying things until I figured it out. And again, I'm old school, so I just go back to the beginning of Xbox, man. I remember when you buy an Xbox, if you wanted to play with your buddy, it was a LAN. He had to come over, bring the cords, and you connect the two, and like that's
That's
how you guys played each other.
that's right.
Like there was no, hey, jump on the internet, this, that. Like it was, we got to link up in the living room, or you put yours in the bedroom and mine's in the living room. And we owned all of our data then. It was, you bought the game, it stayed in your home, all your gameplay was on your console. And essentially 2025 has now given us that opportunity as the individual user. And that's what I've built with BrockBox. So without going into it too much, just think of it again as the closest thing I can put it to is like an Xbox. So, but for AI. So if you need a legal assistant, you pop in your legal assistant cartridge and it all stays local on your hard box, on your hardware, and nothing ever leaves their hardware. It doesn't touch the cloud. It's not connected to the cloud in any way. And they've given us the model, right? There's so many open source models now, that we can all use. And of course, don't get me wrong, there's updates coming every day, right? But if you think about it, there's still companies, I mean, Cisco, some of these big companies, they use hardware that's so outdated, but it works, right? So it's like, do we really need an update every day? Not necessarily, right? We could take the open source models that they've given us and use those to, again, tutoring for our kids when we get to train it and tell it exactly what they're tutoring our children. We get to tune it so that if you want just a Spanish tutor and you don't have to worry about any, I mean, now if you see some of the news, the one that comes to mind for me is the open AI where it assisted or allegedly assisted the teenager in committing suicide.
Right,
And
right. Now,
and
so
I don't know
you're
if you've seen that.
I did, and
Yeah.
I apologize to interrupt you. So
No, you're good.
this could be used, Kyle, conceivably, and it's also on your website, Brockbox, where that's part of the audience that you want to reach is uh, conceivably a school, primary school, a high school, could purchase your product, and you could use that AI model in air gapped, which just means it's not connected to the cloud. The data never leaves the box
Yes, sir.
itself. So your child's information, the way they're trained, and all of that information stays local. And
Yes.
nobody, no foreign government will ever know about, your child's learning situation and how that went. And I thought that was a very powerful because every parent can understand the value of that. So would you would they just buy it from you, you ship it to them, and you walk them through installing? How does that work when the customer actually gets your product?
So essentially, you would just go online and tailor your order to what you need
Okay.
BrockBox for. So again, I started with my buddy. I worked at a law firm, so I kind of started with that, and that's what really got me digging into it. And especially in Texas, there's a new law coming in, taking effect January 1st, around governance of AI.
And
So
that's that's Traega, right? Is that
yeah,
correct? What it's called? Okay.
that is correct. And they're just really cracking down on, where all your data goes, lived, and being able to explain like how your AI made the decision that it did, right? And knowing that it's unbiased. And so there's just a lot of new laws coming into place. And again, 2025 just gave us so many more options with the open source models, the hardware. I mean, they're coming out with something new every day. It's hard to keep up, honestly. I am I'm just a dad by myself trying to do all this and keep up, and I don't have any team or anything behind me. So, but yeah, essentially, you would order it online. So if you need it for your law firm and
Mhm.
you need, for document handling, you would specify, and then we would go in and detail it to whatever specifications that you need. If you need it for K through 12 tutoring, then you would go through and say, hey, we need one for this grade specifically for this. And then we would build it to that, ship it out to you, just like that. So each one is tailored to the customer's individual needs.
And Kyle, would it be fair to say that they're essentially buying a PC cube with AI preloaded? Would that be probably the most straightforward way to describe it?
Correct.
And that's
Correct.
easy to,
So
and that's easy to understand,
yeah.
that's really good. Now, law firms, I don't want to go too deep into the weeds because you and I could talk deeply about that. I was a insurance fraud investigator. So
Wow.
I was on the other end of the phone with the people you worked for. So we were on different, but sometimes the injury law firms did have a client that was legitimately injured. And of course, my role was to determine the people who were legitimately injured and needed to be paid, and we didn't want to fight them in trial versus where we've got a 2-inch scratch on the back of a bumper and 8 people inside are all claiming soft tissue injury. So that's
Yes.
so you and I both went through that, and again, I had deep sympathy for the people that are, because some people's lives are completely transformed by
Oh yeah.
auto accidents, and those people absolutely should be paid. The insurance companies need to pony up and take care of these people, absolutely. But let's face it, not all law firms are created equal, and not all. And sometimes the law firm is innocent, but the client is misrepresenting their injuries. But do you think that Traega, this Texas legislation, I'm surprised Texas came first because usually big legislation like that happens in California, and then it starts to spread east. Do you think that BrockBox is a solution not just for Traega, but as I'm sure Traega-like legislation is going to start being implemented in other states, and I think you would be at the perfect inflection point where you could start to provide this service to make sure that everybody is in compliance with the law.
That's essentially my idea. I know Colorado has some laws in place as well. Um, but again, I mean, if you ask anybody, I don't think anybody will say, "Hey, yeah, we see laws get loosening up around AI." I feel like if anything, it's only going to get more strict, and they will, everybody's going to want to know, where my data goes, what is and how is AI making these decisions, and I feel like it's only going to get tighter. So I do see Rockbox as positioned to go in any state, anywhere. We are currently in talks with we're trying to work with USDA and possibly get a Rockbox in the hands of every individual farmer. Again, they create mass amounts of data, and I hear again I see you're in the mix in the tech world and whatnot, and so I'm sure you've heard every tech giant talking about universal basic income nowadays and
I
how
Yes, that's a conversation for another time, Kyle. I'll tell you this. This isn't my opinion.
yeah
I'm just saying every model that I've, because my thing is economics. I'm a
yeah
writer, I'm in the insurance industry, but my fascination, what I spend most of my time reading about privately, and I don't talk about this as much on the channel, but economics is something that I look at a lot because economics is really a study of human behavior. Why am I looking at it? Because I'm 10 years away from retirement. I'm trying to figure out what world I'm going to be in when I'm no longer earning income, you know, so I'm thinking about that part of my journey. So I need to know what the world's going to look like 10 years from now. And the mastermind group that I'm in, the people that I've consulted with privately from different facets of life, I have not heard a good counter argument that we're not going to universal basic income. And I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm saying
Yeah,
the way things are going now, I hesitate to say it's inevitable, but I have not seen a good counter argument for what the alternative looks like. So I'm not saying to be afraid of that necessarily.
yeah,
There's still going to be a market for things. Human be, you know, in other words, men are still going to be trying to find their life partner. Women are still, you know, all of those social things that we do as humans, none of that's going to stop. And there's still going to be some kind of market for that. But yeah, universal basic income. If something doesn't change, if we don't, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go, but just to riff off of what you said, yeah, universal basic income almost seems inevitable. I hope not, and I hope they come up with some great alternative to that. So sorry,
that's
go ahead.
no, no, you're good, and that's I love hearing that because I love hearing different opinions on it and where different people, especially coming from, you said economics is your, so I'm like I love hearing those things because especially when you said, it almost looks inevitable, and there I haven't heard any. I guess I haven't heard any good counter to it, right? Other than what I can, what I've come up with myself, or what I think of, is again, every single one of us as an individual creates massive amounts of data every day, but we're not benefiting from it. We're not being paid from it. But yet, all these big companies are making millions of dollars. I mean, OpenAI just paid Reddit $60 million for user data, but the users got zero.
That's right. That's right. There's no share in.
That's what I mean. So like
Yeah,
if
because we're the product.
we
We're what's
e-
being sold. Our attention. Well,
exactly,
look at Gary Vaynerchuk, who's, you know, he's the current darling of social media and marketing.
yeah,
And his last book, the title was called Day Trading Attention, because that's what we're doing. What we're doing. We want as many eyeballs as we can get on this live, and sometimes we have to be a little bit more. I would be much more reserved in my presentation style, but I know that, you know, unfortunately, I got to get these kind of spammy thumbnails and wild looking stuff that I really don't like that. I wish I could just deliver the good information and people would want to be informed, but people have a strong desire to be entertained versus informed, but I
you are
digress.
not wrong. You are not wrong, brother. Yeah, that's I just feel like, man, data is where it's at nowadays. Like I said, I go back to that's the new oil. If we could put it back in the hands, and in the hands of the individual user, put ownership in the hands of the individual user again. I mean, we used to have it. We all owned CDs. When you bought a CD, you owned it. You could drive up to the woods in the middle of nowhere and pop it in your car. You have music. Nowadays, if you try and download a song to actually like have the song, it's considered pirating.
That's right. We're in a rental economy.
They,
I think car ownership won't exist 10 years from now. I'll tell
yeah,
you, and this is inside information about I can only speak about the largest insurance company, and you can look them up who I'm talking about, the largest auto insurance carrier. I won't say them by name. Um, they're what they've been spending their money on in the last 10 years has nothing to do with auto insurance. So they see a sea change, and I think it's going to be non-owned, rented, autonomous vehicles. Everything's going to be delivery or, you know, so again, the people that have the classic 1957 Chevy, that's all. We're still going to have roads. We're still going to have that
oh yeah,
infrastructure. But individual car ownership, cars have already gotten so even a basic halfway decent car now is 60 grand. I bought my truck for 10 grand cash in 2016. It was a 2-year-old truck. And I'm an anomaly around here. People are, you know, $1,000 car payment a month has become very typical, and people are leasing. I mean, that's not me. I want to live way below my means, but I don't think 10 years from now, car ownership is going to be the norm at all. It's going to be the exception, and it'll be the guys with the classic roadsters and muscle cars. And same thing with what we're talking about here as far as data and the electronics. Everything has gotten so expensive that you really can't own anything. And to give you a vision of the future, I think 10 years from now, somebody's going to deliver. They're going to deliver the food to your house, but it's not going to be food in the traditional sense. It's going to be a big canister of protein, a big canister of carbohydrate, and a big canister of fat. And you're going to have some kind of 3D printing machine that prints out your pizza. And I'm not joking. I mean, I'm laughing now, but we've seriously talked about that because think about the movie Idiocracy, which everybody says is a documentary because it's turned out to be so prophetic. What was the number one problem they were trying to solve in the movie Idiocracy that created all the tension of the film? They had a problem feeding their people, and with universal basic income and the rise of technology involved in everything, like you said, farming is heavily data driven and technological. So I think going to the store and getting a chicken will be on its way out probably 10 years from now. But of course, this is not a show about futurism, but just to give you an idea of how crazy it could go to have a leafy head of lettuce might not be a norm 10 years from now.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's yeah, we're on a crazy path right now. And that's again, that's why I go back to, having now a grandson and a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. I'm like, this is a world that they're gonna be going into. And I can't just say I can't just deny it and say I'm gonna keep them away from it. Like that's not, of course they're young. So we keep them away from it now. We don't give them screens, stuff like that, at 2 and 5.
Good for
Um,
you. Yeah, good for
but
you.
like but I can't deny the fact that that's going to be their world, right?
Yes.
Like the little bit of AI that we're dealing with now is going to be nothing in comparison to when they are 25 and 30. So all I can, and again, I just go back to the massive amounts of data that they are getting from everybody and that we all create on a daily basis. So if we can just put the ownership back in the hands of the individual,
Sure.
and that's why I say 2025 kind of changed everything for us as the individual user because we now have the hardware and the open source models and everything we need to, I guess, kind of take back control.
Absolutely.
But
And Kyle, something to support what you're doing. When I mentioned to a friend of mine I was bringing you on and I was explaining your background and somebody said, "Well, they already have all of our data. Like what's the?" And I said, "Look, I said I'm not the same guy I was 10 years ago. If you turned off my data now, the computer's going to be really hard, it's going to be really hard pressed to figure out what I'm going to want or what I'm going to like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years from now. So just because it knew, just because Amazon knew I liked a particular type of tea for about 3 years, I'm different. I don't like that brand anymore. I like different things. So I think is a very strong case to cut off the data now because they'll just have some antiquated version of you of what your preferences were before. What do you think about that?
I 1,000% agree. And I feel the same way. And again, just going back to my background, they have everything. I've done time, and spent time in prison. So they have my DNA, my swab. They have everything of me that I can think of, right? So, but my 2-year-old and my 5-year-old shouldn't have to give up face scans and voice recognition and all that just to play ABC Mouse or something, like they didn't do anything to deserve all that, they didn't lose. Like to play a game, I just think it's crazy nowadays. And
Well, you're providing an important opportunity, Kyle, because when the last cultural revolution happened in the United States, and people joke and they laugh about this, but people learned a lot from this period in the 1960s, which I wasn't around then. But when people really didn't like what was going on with society, they moved away. They went and got 50 acres with 10 or 12 of their buddies.
yeah,
And of course, we use words like compounds and we use all this negative stuff, that there were cults or whatever, but there were actually really workable, positive collectives where people were
homesteads.
That's right. They were homesteading on a large scale. They were very happy. Some of that experimentation, a lot was learned on that. I had Travis Holsom, who's a permaculture expert on the channel, and people love that. I think that's in the top five um, popular episodes of all of the interviews because people wanted to know he can help you grow a forest. He calls it a food forest in your backyard. So
Awesome.
I think the alternative in the 1960s, if they wanted to get out of that environment, they had to move away. Whereas what you're providing is you can still live in your apartment, live in your condo, live in your house, and you have this. I think of what you provide as a digital safe room in your house. If you've got a safe room to go for physical security, well, then Kyle has this safe room for your data security.
That's spot on, spot on. Because again, BrockBox ships out, you plug it in, it doesn't touch your existing operating system. You can plug it in anywhere there's a power source, and it creates its own network. So not have to worry about integration with other systems that you have or anything like that, transferring things over. Because I know that was always a pain, especially working in a law firm. You know, they didn't, and still to this day, most law firms don't want to switch to a new system because they don't want to have to learn all the new integration and all the new things that go with it. That's a week of training everybody.
Attorneys
And
generally aren't tech people, are they? They're
I
not,
just,
they're not usually, there are just certain fields where
uh,
they're allergic to technology. Well, the biggest thing I was shocked about the Brock box is I just assumed that a large language model from a data perspective was so gigantic that there was no way you could put it on a drive. So can you give me an idea of how big this preloaded software is in terms of gigs or terabytes?
so again, it just goes back to what they've put out there now, open source wise. And when it comes to the model wise, it would all depend on what the user wanted. If somebody wants just a chat GPT, we could essentially load that and they would use that for, whatever basic tasks around the office, handling emails or whatnot. Um, and the I guess the gigabytes or whatnot that are available nowadays is just insane to us. And I don't think people realize how much um, data you can hold on, an SD card or a USB stick. You can hold crazy amounts of data
That's right. That's right. And
on
I
it.
got and I've had hard drive failures over the years, and I've had one SSD failure, which was shocking because it was a high end thing. But I don't have any moving hard drives anymore. I don't have any spinning disks for security purposes and for speed. But yeah, these you've got these tiny thumb drives that hold more than 10 households of computers in the 1990s. I just couldn't believe that a large language model could even fit on a drive because I just presumed you needed a server farm. So that's how ignorant I was about the technology. I don't want to hold you up from your family on Thanksgiving Day, but Kyle, would you be interested in helping? Because I know some people are going to have questions about this episode, and I encourage them to subscribe to the channel. Put questions in the chat, and if I get questions on this particular video, if you don't mind, I can pass them on to you, and you can give me the answers, and I'll fill it out on YouTube. Or if you want to be interactive in the comments yourself, I will put your brockbox.com on there. You're also very active on LinkedIn, which is great. I've just really started to understand the power of LinkedIn in the last couple of months. Um, I'll give you the final word. Anything you wish I'd asked or anything you thought we should talk about?
Man, Robert, I really appreciate you just taking the time. Again, I am just grateful that anybody wants to hear my story, I guess. And so again, just thank you so much. I'm just trying to build something for my kids, man. Just protect their future, really.
I love it. I love it. Well, we fall in love with the story. We fall in love with the motivation. And when I read what you were doing, I didn't understand it at first, but I thought this sounds really fascinating. I'm not sure what Kyle's doing, And then, of course, thanks to you, thanks to your post, I went out there, and when I invited you on, it forced me to have to go learn a bit. And I don't have the skill set you have now, but at least, I can understand the value of what you're bringing. And man, if you get that USDA contract, man, just let me get on the yacht one time, just remember us little people out here, Kyle, when you make it. Don't forget about me, all right?
You can come out to the farm, brother, for sure. We'll be out on the farm.
I appreciate you, Kyle. How, other than people going to brockbox.com, do you want them to connect with you via LinkedIn? You want to give people your email? What do you prefer?
You can always find me on LinkedIn or yeah, LinkedIn. Just shoot me a message or Brockbox at proton.me. Perfect.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving to you too, brother, and you have a blessed day.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Kyle. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, you and I are still on Zoom, but the